Welcome.
Oh, glad to see you, John.
What's your full name, Joe?
My full name is Joseph Benjamin Palazzolo Jr.
Okay. Was that where did the names come from? Was this
Okay, the name Joseph was my father's father and my father.
Oh.
They both were Josephs. I'm really the third in reality. But for some reason in Brooklyn, they didn't believe in thirds. They called me Junior. And Benjamin was my godfather, as my uncle was also my godfather. And the last name is my father's, and my father's and grandfather's name.
Did you ever meet your father's parents?
Yeah, but I was too young to really remember. I think they died. I must have been about 3 or 4, so I was really young.
Okay.
So while in the meantime, I met my mother's mother and father, but again, my grandfather died at a very young age, and consequently, I think he was 49 to be exact. So I always knew my grandmother until 1969 when she passed away. And, we knew cousins from Italy, those who came here. Very nice.
I assume your maternal grandparents were Italian.
Both maternal and paternal.
And paternal.
Well, years ago, there wasn't a belief in intermarriage. And that was intermarriage, even though, you're talking about you might be Catholic and marry someone who's German, who's Catholic or Irish. But it was intermarriage. People stayed more or less.
Yes. Did you have any nicknames growing up?
Yeah, but I can't mention them. Oh boy, I couldn't mention it.
Did you ever have the pleasure of going to Italy to see where your folks came from?
Absolutely. I've gone about 4 times already.
Have you?
My daughters have gone 6 times, mind you. And very nice. The very first, can I mention that?
Sure.
The very first time I went.
Where would it have been?
My mother was born about an hour and a half outside of Naples in a province called Avellino. And when we went there, my kids were very small. They were like 3 and 4 or 4 and 5. And my kids were never big ice cream eaters. But my cousins grabbed the kids and walked them around the town while we walked around the town. If you ever see some of these old movies, arm in arm with all the relatives. And my kids must have had 6 gelati, 6 ice creams. And they said, Dad, I love it. They wanted to call my mother to tell her to move back. Because don't forget that being babies in Italy, if you're a small child, you can't go wrong. When I wanted to holler at my kids in Rome because they do running near the grass, this old lady said to me, leave them alone, they're children. Don't yell at them. Just enjoy them.
Wonderful. That's an enlightened
it really was
point of view.
No, but if you have little children in Italy, it's like a key. They make you go ahead online, they make you do all these things. So that was nice.
So were they both from Rome originally?
No. My mother was from Naples, from outside of Naples, actually, about an hour and a half out. My father was from Sicily, from Castellomare del Golfo, which, if you see in some of these mafia pictures, that's where it originated. And
what does your name mean?
Small building.
Okay.
Or small palace. Okay?
Now, your present family situation is what, Joe?
Well, presently, my mother and father are both dead, but my wife and myself are all alone because our kids got married. And
empty nest. Right?
Yeah, an empty nest syndrome. And my one daughter is married 5 years and just had a baby boy a couple of months ago. So I'm a grandfather. I feel like an old man. And my other daughter was just divorced. And I guess she's on the search again. Okay, but since she didn't really believe in just a civil divorce, she wanted to go through the church, and she's getting an annulment.
Okay. Let me ask you, before we talk about your own children, what did your father do for a living? What was his occupation?
Okay, my father was a factory worker at the beginning when they first came over.
And when would that have been, Joe?
Oh, gee. I'm not sure. 39, 40, I'm not really sure. And then my father sort of, quote unquote, graduated and became a doorman. So
Okay.
that was like, considered a great job.
So they got here right before World War II. then?
Yeah, yeah,
Both of them.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, it was funny because politically, my mother was a monarchist, and my father was a socialist. So it's kind of strange, that kind of thing. And then my mother and father both follow socialism, but with the king. Yeah, okay?
So they met here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And what did your mother, probably from her generation, was a homemaker and didn't work? Is that?
Yeah, this is exactly it. At that time, women didn't go out to work unless they really were forced to. So my mother was at home. My father worked at a factory. And my mother managed to never throw out. We had a depression mentality. My mother never threw out a stitch of food. She'd always recycle it in some way. So it was an interesting situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
While my father was more modern than my mother, I think I followed after my mother, more conservative and traditional.
Now, where was your father a doorman? What building would he, or buildings?
It was on Fifth Avenue, and I don't remember the address, but it was one of those fancy co-ops that faced the park.
Oh, so 24 hours a day there was a doorman on duty?
There was a doorman on duty 24 hours a day, and he loved it. He got along, both with the other workers as well as with the tenants, and with his own boss, and they always treated him very nicely.
How old was your father when he passed away?
My father was 76.
All right. So he retired long before.
He had retired at 62.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to two gentlemen, Bob and Harry, who are both math teachers in this building. And they did some figuring, and they said it would be better if he retired at 62. In the long run, he would make more money. And that was exactly it.
Mm-hmm.
So he retired at 62. And my mother died at 75.
Mm-hmm.
They died, let's see, 1993, approximately 3 years apart. Yeah.
Where, when we were talking before about your children, did they go to school here in Brentwood? Or?
Yeah, no. My kids went to school in the city.
Okay.
And then when we moved out here about 20 some odd years ago, they started in Smithtown. And my children were shocked because they said, "Look, Daddy, there's no dittos. Or rather, there is dittos. We don't have to copy everything off the board," which is totally different from New York City, which either they had no dittos or they weren't able to afford the dittos. My children were shocked that there was dittos. They didn't have to copy anymore.
Yes. And now, tell me something about each of the girls again now.
Yeah, my daughter Gina is the oldest.
Mm-hmm.
And she was married to a doctor, and lo and behold, she walked out on him for whatever, some of the reasons that she had given me, I promised I would never mention.
Sure.
But they were good reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And she has a master's degree. She's going to be an ESL teacher, and hopefully in Brentwood. Okay? My daughter Claudia is married 5 years, just had a little baby. She's a kindergarten teacher, and she's right here in Brentwood. So, it's like they're all following the father, I guess.
How do you like being a grandfather?
Well, as I said, it made me feel old. I never felt old. Age never meant anything to me except for this particular event.
Yeah, that's got to be life-changing.
Oh, absolutely.
The personalities of your daughter, are they the same? Are they different?
No, their personalities are totally different. Mm-hmm. My daughter Gina has many ways like my brother, but at the same time, she still has some of my ways. While my brother is, reticent about a lot of things, mysterious, which we always attributed to being part Sicilian, and but she's very interested in things. She has a lot of friends. She goes out quite a bit.
What are her interests, Joe?
Well, I know she's an avid reader as the first thing. I know she loves the beach as a second item, but I know as a reader, she subscribes to National Geographic. She likes to go to shows, to a disco, what have you. So she has like a wide range. She likes to see like Broadway shows or shows.
And what would you identify as some of the gifts that she came into this world with?
Well, I tell you, I think she's a very, very hard worker.
Okay.
And that to me is important because this is how we were brought up, to work hard to get whatever you're going to get. And she's very independent, very much like my mother. Very much like my mother. In fact, for some of the ways that she has, she's similar to my mother. Okay. Well, my daughter Claudia looks, well, first of all, my daughter Gina looks more like our family. You know, she has dark complexion, dark hair, dark eyes. My daughter Claudia is a brownish blonde, because don't forget my wife is Irish, English and Norwegian, and she resembles more my wife's side, although people say she looks like me. I don't know about that. But she has my wife's personality, very easygoing, really nice, a lot of fun, and not serious.
And what about her qualities and her gifts?
I tell you the truth, when she decided she was going to get serious about something, she knew what she wanted, she had her goal, and she never let anything stop her from getting what she wanted, which is the same way as my daughter Gina, because my daughter Gina is the same way. She wanted a master's in ESL. She went and she got it.
So in that way, they're very similar.
Yeah, in that way, definitely.
And how are they different?
Well, as I said, my daughter Gina is more serious.
Okay.
And she keeps more things to herself.
Okay. Okay.
I would like to use the word thoughtful.
Yes.
While my daughter Claudia was like my father, everything would come out. There would be no secrets.
You mentioned your wife. What's your wife's name, and how did you guys meet?
Okay, my wife's name was Marion, I should say. And we met of all places down in confraternity. Okay, now, we were never, my family was never a big church goer, but it was around the Vietnam period, and we were losing our draft status. So I went down because I needed a priest recommendation if I were going to get a job in a Catholic school. So I'm thinking about this, and I said, well, I guess I better go down and do something. So as I go down there and meet her, I met her the first night. I walked her home, and I don't know if it was the following Friday, we went out on a date in the pouring rain at Coney Island with my little portable global radio. And
did you know right away, or was it a gradual?
No, I knew right away. In fact, I had said to her, I said, you know something? You're going to marry me at the wind-up.
Wow.
And I'm going to marry us. You just know sometimes. And we've been married for 30 years.
And you didn't frighten her away, I guess.
No. We've been married for 30 years. It's been an interesting up and down kind of situation, as all relationships should and would be. And I have to say, although I hate to admit this, I did learn things from her. I don't know if she learned from me, but I definitely learned from her.
What did she teach you, Joe?
Well, she taught me how to be more careful. She taught me how to be more thoughtful. She tried to teach me not to shoot off, get mad and just lose my temper, although most of the times I still did. But she, especially when I thought it was something extremely important, but she taught me to be tolerant of people. I think she was the most tolerant person I've ever met.
You're fortunate because it certainly manifested itself in your work too, with the lessons that you picked up from her.
No doubt about it. When we were first married and I was first teaching, she would type up all my exams. She would take them to work and type up the exams. She'd do it at home. So it was a joint effort to get the things done that had to be done.
Did she ever work as part of your?
At the beginning, when we first got married, there was no children, and I really wasn't happy about her working, because I really felt, going back to being an old traditionalist, I felt, it's like an insult to my personality that my wife would have to work. So what I've tried to do, and not always succeeded, was that I would never use her money. It was her money. She had her bank account because she would pay for trips, the special trips that she wanted to go, that we would go on with the family and all. And she never was, cheap about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was a good situation.
I want to ask you again about your grandchild. How old?
The grandchild is 4 months old,
Okay.
and his name is Douglas Jr. His father and I get along marvelously. In fact, last night it was my turn to take him for chimichangas at a Mexican restaurant.
Yes.
And we go every couple of months. He pays once, I pay once. We sit, we talk about the family, we talk
Great.
about different things.
Wonderful.
He's a fine young man and talented.
That's
Not only like in music, but he's in a band also besides his regular job.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a marvelous carpenter.
Really?
Absolutely marvelous. He wanted to build me a deck, and I said no, thank you. But it was amazing.
I gather then from what you're saying, you have a good deal of contact. Even though you have an empty nest at the moment, you still have a good deal of contact.
We have a good deal of contact with the kids because my daughter Gina lives on the border of Kings Park and Smithtown, way north of Jericho. My other daughter Claudia lives north of Jericho, but she lives more toward St. Patrick's Roman Catholic Church on Jericho Turnpike. So consequently, we speak to the kids every day, and if we don't speak to them every day, we see them. So in reality, it's not anything missing.
Joe, where were you born, and when were you born?
Okay, I was born in the United States. I was born in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg to be exact.
Okay.
1940, February 1944.
Mm-hmm. And Roosevelt was still your president at that point. 44? Oh yeah,
he
Roosevelt
was still
your president.
Yeah. He died in 45.
Yes,
Right,
yeah.
right.
What are some of the earliest memories you have of Williamsburg or of growing up?
Well, in those days there were things called neighborhoods. I think what nowadays people call ghettos were really neighborhoods at one time. And every neighborhood in Brooklyn would be more or less divided up. There'd be an Irish section, a Russian and Polish section, an Italian section, a Spanish section. And we lived in the Italian section. And we went to Lady of Mount Carmel Church. And more or less, we grew up with a lot of people who came either from our town or from near our town.
So your wife must have lived in a nearby area then?
No, what happens later on, my brother was always a sickly guy. He had rheumatic fever. And the doctor advised us to move from there because the rooms, were bad. There was no central heat. We used to have a boiler in the middle of the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And what we did, we moved to the city projects in Astoria. And my wife lived in Astoria.
Uh-huh.
And she went to St. Rita's Church, and so did we at the wind-up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You mentioned your brother. How many brothers and sisters or siblings did you have?
Okay, I have just one brother.
Okay.
Who is married. He has a son, about 12 years old. He's currently separated from his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's doing okay. I mean, at times, maybe bouts of depression because of my mother and father dying and stuff like that, and maybe because him and the wife and the son.
What is your brother? His vocation or avocation?
Okay, my brother went to school for radio and TV.
Mm-hmm.
However, because my brother's a perfectionist, he never stayed with any job. For example, in NBC, he had a job. Cable TV, he had a job. So because he was a person who wanted everything to be done according to what you're supposed to do, he wound up switching out and he wound up working in these high-rise buildings on Fifth Avenue, also near where my father worked.
I'll be darned. Okay.
And he does TVs, radios, I'm dating myself, phonographs, but things like that. And others. He's a handy person. He knows how to do everything. Not like his brother, who don't know how to do anything.
Going back to your growing up period, What were what dreams did you have as a child, Joe? What fantasies did you entertain?
You know, that's a difficult question because I really never believed in fantasies. And I was a very pragmatic person, I
Mhm.
guess. I knew I wanted to improve. I remember my mother pushing education. My father didn't really matter. He never, said anything. Just, but my mother was one who pushed education and, went to high school. But before I went to in the junior high, I was thinking about going to a technical school, aviation high school, which is in Queens. I don't know
Mm.
exactly what part. And then I thought about Thomas Edison High School, which was in Brooklyn. And I was thinking about becoming an electrician. Then one of my friends said, "Come on, let's go to college. Let's go to regular academic high school." And my other friend was going to the same place, and another friend was going to the same place. So I went. I figured I'd be with company. And thanks to them, in part, certainly my mother, my uncle Pat, whose name was Pasqualino, but thanks to them, I went to college.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was in college, around the second year, I was thinking about dropping out and going to the service. And my uncle and my mother kept on hounding me until finally went back to school.
What college were you in at that time?
Queens College.
Queens, okay. Mm-hmm.
It was Queens College of the city of New York.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, you didn't pay. If you were lucky enough to get in, you didn't pay. And the first year I went to Queens College, we didn't even pay for books. But then the second year, the city got stingy, we had to pay.
Yeah. Now, talking about your mother once again, what was her maiden name?
My mother's maiden name was Castaldi.
Mm-hmm.
And
you know anything about her family history?
oh yeah, absolutely. My grandfather, her father, was a baker in Italy, and some of his relatives still have a bakery in the next town. It was like they employed about 40 people, and it was almost like a commercial bakery, I would say, but except for maybe 3 or 4 towns around, or 5 towns. And then the way the story was told to me, he did something to someone. It seems that there were these people who were called Camoristas, sort of like the mafia, but they were in Naples. They weren't Sicilian. And I don't know whether he struck him or there was some problem. And he had to flee, not flee, but he had to leave the country.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why him and my grandmother came here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but
do you have childhood memories of your mother?
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have childhood memories. I always remember one thing, and that was she never wasted anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a typical depression
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
person where they did anything. They, like, if she made macaroni, like, spaghetti on Thursday, she makes spaghetti and egg pie on Friday.
Yes,
Because we
yes,
didn't need meat
yes.
on Friday.
What were the things that really gave her pleasure? The
I
things
think
that she
her
enjoyed?
family, especially her children, her family, because she was very close with her sisters as well, which we all lived within about 2 blocks of one another when we lived in Brooklyn. Then 2 of my aunts moved to Queens Village. Then we moved there eventually. And then the aunts moved to Floral Park.
Oh.
So there was always, my mother and father more or less with my aunts and my uncles most of the time. And it was a very strange thing because the idea of the family being so important. They had outside friends, but and good friends. It's just that it seemed like the family was the focal point. The children, to be
Yours was
exact.
not really a big family, was it?
No, my personal family, no.
Mm-hmm.
But, we've always associated with my cousins, my aunts, my uncles.
So the extended family.
So we had a large extended family. And I think it's nice when you grow up that way.
Now, you no doubt have some early memories of your father.
Oh, absolutely.
What comes to mind immediately?
Well, 2 or 3 things come to mind. One thing I remember was that my father was a rabid Yankee fan. And my father used to take me and my brother to night games to see the Yankees. And then when we come home, we'd say to my mother, "Let him sleep. Don't let him go to school tomorrow. He's tired." So that was one. That was one thing that was funny, and he would be very strange in certain things. For example, he and I went to, well, it's later, we went to Las Vegas, and my father won a great deal of money. And I went to borrow one of his stamps. He almost chopped my hand off. In the meantime, he was paying for my room. He was paying for the flight. You know, it was funny. He was just eccentric, I guess, in that way. But my father really, you know, more like a family man. He wanted us to naturally walk the straight and narrow and try to. He got me a job at 8 years old. To give you an idea, I would help him clean halls. Where he used to work in a factory, the boss owned a couple of private homes that were like, I wouldn't call them tenements, but they were on the line of tenements. And my father sometimes on Saturday would go and wash all the floors, and then he would take me to make me...
Would that be like those little marble tile floors or wood floors?
No, wood floors. Wood floors. And he would take me and I would either sweep them or something, then he would wash them.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't remember if I asked you this, Joe. On your father's side of the family, what was your grandfather's occupation, or what was the?
Okay, when my grandfather was in Italy, I think he was a day laborer on a farm. Okay, however, according to what people say, he was involved with the mafia. And but at the time, the mafia wasn't as it is now. It was like they would fight the latifundistas, you know, the people who owned big farmlands and who would cheat people, you know, for food and what have you.
It was political,
and it was a political thing. They would try to be like a Robin Hood, who would steal from the rich and give to the poor, and lived in the mountains sometimes. When he came to the United States, he would no longer be involved with the mafia. He wanted to work, you know, honestly, and that would be that. That was, you know, his interest.
You sound like you've had a very close family experience. What lessons has your family taught you?
Well, I think for one thing, to accept people for what they are.
Okay.
I wasn't really affected too much by this, but I know my father was kind of like always, not mistrusting, but always having a second thought about something. But more or less, they taught us to treat people as you wanted yourself to be treated. They trained us never to steal or be dishonest or what have you, and to stand up for what you thought was right, no matter what, no matter what. And I think that carried on later on into my life because I did cut my throat a couple of times, and I don't regret it.
Joe, how did you feel as a teenager?
As a teenager, I felt okay. I never felt anything really different. I always had that one idea about doing the right thing, about working, because my father and mother were very big on the work ethic. Yeah. It was like, you know, you had to work. Yeah.
Outside of family members, was there any adult outside of your immediate family that had a profound effect upon your
yeah, two people. My Uncle Ben was a man who, you know, an average man. He was a carpenter, and he loved to tend the garden and loved to have a large family, and loved being with the family and with his children, and just enjoyed life. He never thought of himself in anything. So that was one person. Then a great uncle by the name of Chito Tonna, because we always saw him, was a man who...
by the way, Ben would have been your father's?
No, it was my mother's brother-in-law. So it was her wife's, her sister's husband.
Through marriage, okay.
And this great uncle, whose name was Zio Totonna, was a man who, very traditional, hardworking, loved to tell stories. And from what I hear, he had an eye for women. I don't know. But that's what they claim. At any rate, when he was coming over on the boat, they claimed that he had a girlfriend on the boat as well. while he was married. Okay, so but he was a very nice man, fun to be with. You know, he just made you feel so much at home when you would go to his house. My aunt as well as my uncle, my great aunt as well as my great uncle. My great aunt was my grandmother's sister, and they just were very laid back kind of people. Yeah.
Who influenced your career choice then?
I think my grandmother,
Hmm.
maybe my mother also, but my grandmother, because I was studying Italian and Spanish in high school, and I was shocked when one day I asked my grandmother something, and she started spouting all the rules that I know today to be part of the language. And I said, Grandma, I didn't know you know all that. You know, and what it was, they had gone to finishing school in Italy and what have you. And I was shocked. And she more or less said, you know, study, be good, marry someone who's Catholic. I mean, that was
Yes.
really the basic
Yes.
thing, you know.
Yes.
And she was a person who had a lot of little different interests. She used to crochet. She used to, you know, read. She used to watch something. She read in English. She could read in Italian, but she read in English as well. And she was able to speak English, broken, but she spoke. I mean, she made herself understood. And I think her push about education, and my mother certainly a push about education, and my uncle Pasqualino. I think these three people were the main thrust as far as studying goes.
So then, when did you actually make the decision?
Well, I was in high school, and people were applying to college.
Yeah.
And I felt, well, I really don't know about college. I don't know if I'm interested. You know, maybe I joined the Navy. And then again, a couple of friends of mine were going to college. And they said, come on, apply. So I said, I don't even know where to apply. And they said, apply to Queens. I said, well, my grades weren't that great, but I took the placement exam in Queens and apparently scored very high because, as I said, it didn't pay anything at all. And according to one of my friends, Tom Dwyer, he said that we had to take the SAT that far back. And very truthfully, I don't remember. I guess he must be right, but I don't remember ever taking that kind of an examination. So at just about midway in my senior year, I decided to apply, and I was pleasantly surprised that I was accepted. And as I said, my marks weren't that great, but I think I must have done okay on the entrance exam.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Do you remember any of your own teachers from the early years?
oh, sure. There was a gentleman, but his name was Mr. Glick. Okay, he was my Spanish teacher. He was also head of the department. The nicest man I've ever met. Kind, thoughtful, pleasant. His name was Irving Glick. And strangely enough, when I moved out to Smithtown, I met a man. I looked at this man and I said, well, I know he's not Mr. Glick, but boy, he looks like him. And I asked the guy, I said, what's your last name? He says, Glick. And I says, I knew it. I said, you look like your brother. I said, I knew it. I could just look at your face. And his brother's doing fine in Florida and what have you. And it was an interesting thing. It was very nice even talking to this man because of his brother. He was a nice man also, but I mean, he was, you know, so I would say he was probably one of the most, and a woman named Ms. Lynch. She was an English teacher, and she had me reading things out loud in the English class, which I didn't want to do. And she gave me a lot of encouragement. So between Mr. Glick and this lady, Miss Lynch, had a great deal of encouragement. And so I decided I was going to study. I was going to become a teacher.
You knew early on.
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, I had thought about being an astronomer because I liked science, but my math skills were never up to par. But I liked being a language teacher, even though it wasn't English like Miss Lynch and all. But the fond thoughts of this Mr. Glick made me think about it.
You mentioned before, Joe, that you used to help your father do things. Did you have, as a member of the family, did you have any chores that you were responsible for at home?
I tell you the truth, in those days, if you were a boy, you really, really didn't have things to do. I think I may have. It wasn't even a chore. I threw out the garbage, but it wasn't even a chore. You know, the boys in Italian families in those days um, weren't allowed to do anything.
Uh-huh.
And till this day, I say I don't know how to wash clothes. I don't know how to iron. I don't know how to do anything. I feel like, God forbid something happens, I'm dead. I'd be dead because I have no idea. And I love my mother dearly for it. But in reality, the reality of the situation is that I really should have learned.
Yeah.
But I was happy that my mother didn't force the issue.
Sure. What was your first paying job?
First paying job was I worked on the tailor underneath the house.
Where you lived?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He had a tailor shop. And no, wait a second. That was not the first paying. The first paying job was in a pizza place. But it was a strange kind of pizza place. It was a bakery and a pizza. Downstairs in the cellar, they made pizzas. They had these huge ovens.
Wow.
And I started working there, but really for a very, very low wage. But I worked there. And then I used to get a bag, if I wanted, I used to get a bag of fresh rolls to bring home. And at the time, pizza was 15 cents, and
Yes,
needless to tell you.
Yes.
It was a nice job. The man was nice. The customers were nice.
Mm-hmm.
And right after, I think it was about 7 or 8. And right after that, I worked in a tailor where I did more or less sweeping and washing the floor and waxing the counter window, you know, the glass counter and what have you. And I used to watch this man sew and watch him press. And I never liked him. Not that he ever said anything to me, but I just never liked him because he didn't want my friends to come over the house or what have you, you know.
Yeah. Did you work at a part-time job while you were in high school?
Yeah, I used to work as first in not King Cullen, but what's the name of it?
Another
Key
supermarket.
Food.
Oh, Key Food.
Key
Yeah,
Food.
okay.
And I used to work with this guy Saul. We used to he used to ring up the stuff, and I used to pack things. And then I got promoted, and I worked where I would go out with carts and home deliver. Then I got switched again, and I worked in the back with this guy Benny, a very nice person. And then that was like the first 2 years. The second 2 years in high school, I worked as a page in the library.
Oh. In the New York Public
New York
Library
Public
system?
Library, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was a family holiday that was very big in your family?
Well, one holiday that was very big, I think things have changed now, but one holiday that was very big was Holy Saturday. Okay, now Holy Saturday was, at the time for Catholics, we used to break our fast at 12 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. So consequently for us, Sunday was going to church, but Saturday was the holiday, sort of like the day before. And they'd do special pasta and special foods, strange foods that you would never associate with being Italian, but like white pasta with, let me think what was in there, with ricotta and, you know, I guess a little olive oil or something. Peas, this pea pie was shaped like a triangle with peas and anchovies, onions. So it was like a pastry. Then there's a thing we call pizza canna, which is, it was a meat pie. It was almost like the French have their, I can't think of the name right now, but ours was much different. It was similar to it. It's like we had salami, an egg, and pepperoni, prosciutto, and 2 different kinds of cheeses. So we had that kind of situation.
You know what strikes me is that it's almost impossible to talk about family holidays without also talking about food.
Yeah, you know, I think all our holidays, I think everything that makes, I think the way I was brought up at any rate, what always was most important is the food. You know, my mother and father were not religious fanatics. They were believers, but they certainly weren't religious fanatics. And well, my aunts were not fanatics, but they were religious, go to church and all. My grandmother certainly was. But everything was surrounded by the idea of food. We'd wait for my father late on Friday night, and we'd have spaghetti with him. We'd come home 11:30 from work. We waited on Sunday for something else, and uh, it was like this idea when everybody was together.
Yeah.
Maybe part of it is the food, and part of it certainly was being together. It's a very nice situation. It made you feel wanted, and you didn't feel alone. If when things happen, because everything happens to people in life, but you felt sort of protected because you had this family protection.
What memories, Joe, do you have of the significant world events that were occurring in the time of your
Okay.
growing up? And
Well, I remember my father had to be the first one on the block to buy a TV, I believe in 1948, but I can't swear to it. And I remember seeing the first election, I think it was Truman, if I'm not mistaken, seeing him with the winning the election. Then again with his first TV, I remember a Yankee game with Boston, and I don't remember the ball player who hit it, but Al Rosen hit a shot to dead center that field, in old Yankee Stadium, and Joe DiMaggio just turned around, his number 5 facing the TV, and he started running with his glove over his head, and he caught the shot, and that's how the Yankees won the pennant. So I remember that. That was maybe not a great political thing, but it was great for us.
yes.
Because we lived in Brooklyn and we used to drive the Dodger
And
fans
it
crazy.
was dancing in the streets.
Absolutely. Well, from us at any rate,
Yes.
while we had a very interesting group of Brooklyn Dodgers who would carry caskets down the middle of the street when Dodgers lost. And it was so typical. And you really couldn't say anything because you were asking to get beaten up if you did. But I remember Sputnik, of course. But that was later. I'm trying to think what other. I remember seeing Bishop Sheen on TV. He was popular at the time.
Which reminds me, what were some of the other television
Jackie Gleason, we used to watch all the time. Art Carney, of course.
Uncle Milty.
Uncle Milty, another one. Let me think of the character people.
The golden age of television, Joe.
Yeah.
You're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Sid Caesar, Imogen Coca. These were like the classic stars, and Red Skeleton and stuff like this. And, it was a different, well, as we know today, it's a different kind of comedy.
Oh, yes.
Those are the days when you had comedy that would be comedy for an entire family, while now, in order to evoke a laughter, they have to either be sarcastic or vulgar, what have you. And it was a different time.
Speaking of that, what makes you laugh today?
I tell you, there's 3 people who make me laugh. Actually, 4 people. 2 of my very good friends, Dr. George Cavuto, who has been a friend since 1972, since I moved out here. A friend named Carmine Zito, who's a character, a funny guy. Both gentlemen have very little time, as I did, because they worked 2 or 3 jobs. My cousin, Joe Inguanti, because even when I'm sad, he can make me laugh. Or if I was depressed. And Joe Governale, one of our teachers, Joe Governale and Lou, when they would get started, I could cry. They used to make me cry. I mean, it was so bad. They would make me cry. Bob Acker, different people who were tremendous.
You're talking about contemporary friends of yours. Do you remember your first day of school?
Yeah, the kindergarten.
Anything happened that stands out in your mind?
Yeah, I really wasn't thrilled about going, as most kids aren't thrilled about going. And I remember it was an all-boys school. I remember going in, and I wanted a particular chair. So I pushed the kid out of the chair, and I took it. And to this day, I have that strange habit where I have to have one particular seat. And a very embarrassing thing, from then to now, it just led all the way through my whole life. There was a teacher sitting in my seat in the teacher's room. He was a sub, and I said, "Hey, get out of my seat. You're sitting in my chair." And the person got up and left, and I said, "Oh my God, I was only kidding, or only partially kidding at any rate." So it carried all the way through my
Oh,
kindergarten thing.
Now would that have been in Williamsburg, by the way?
Yes,
that school.
it was PS 23.
Okay. Let's see. You've thanked you've commented on a number of the teachers. I imagine Mr. Glick would have been one of those that if you could thank him, you would be thanking him.
Without a doubt, because I felt he was a good role model. I wanted to be like him because he seemed to know a lot. He seemed to have great empathy with the students. He seemed to have had a lot of understanding. The same thing with Miss Lynch, who was an
Yes.
English teacher. She was a marvelous teacher. Some people didn't like her because she could be tough, but she was fair and she was thoughtful about your feelings, and she pushed you. She thought that she could get more out of you.
You mentioned before that you were not satisfied with your own math performance.
Right.
Would that have meant that was not one of your favorite subjects in
Yeah,
school?
math was a very bad subject from the beginning.
Yeah.
I remember one particular year in school, 4th grade, the teacher put me under her desk as a punishment. And she used to wear these shoes that used to look like space shoes, and they used to tease her and call her Space Shoes Bassa. And I couldn't even imagine that a teacher would put me under a desk because I didn't know something. And my teacher, Miss Wilkins, my 1st grade teacher, put me in the dump seat for math. They would sit in the front. There was this chair designated the dump seat. You wear a dunce cap. I mean, talk about humiliation.
Talk about abuse, emotional abuse.
Terrible.
Hey, what year? 2 things. You went to Queens College. Did you get your graduate degree there as well?
No, I went to NYU.
Okay.
And I had my graduate degree there. I originally started NYU in an MA PhD program. They had accepted me for the program. I finished my MA. I took the comprehensives, and I was all set to start taking PhD courses. Then I had gotten married. 14 months afterwards, my first daughter was born. 14 months after that, my second daughter was born. So then I bought a house. I mean,
when did you first come to Brentwood?
I came to Brentwood, let me see, 1966. And Brentwood was a very, very interesting place. I remember driving my mother and grandmother out here, and they were talking, and my grandmother called it La Campagna, which is the country,
yes,
as compared to the city, because it was.
Yes.
It was a beautiful school. You know, we didn't see anything like a school like this in the city.
That's right.
We drove by Intimans, and at that time it was like a mom and pop kind of place. It was very rural out here at the time. But naturally, in 33 years, I've seen tremendous changes.
Why did you come to Brentwood, or how did you hear about the...
Well, it was very strange. I originally had a job in Bryant High School in part of Queens, but I can't think of the part of it now. At any rate, one day, the gentleman called me, Dr. Appel, who had recommended me for the job there to begin with, and was department chairman of language. And he said, I don't know what happened. He said, but New York City said, we can't take any teachers. Now here I'm figuring I just graduated. I didn't have my student deferment. And I was up in the air, ready to get drafted, okay? And I said, boy, why would they draft me now? They should have drafted me while I was in college. This way, if anything happened, that would be that. I didn't have to work so hard.
And we're well into Vietnam at this point.
Yeah, and as I said, my feeling was, and you should have drafted me before I went to college, and whatever would happen. So after I couldn't get a job in the city, and I had a New York City license, I said, oh, I'm really in trouble. And I went down to Queens College. And at the same time, I contacted the priest about working in confraternity because I'm thinking I need a recommendation.
Yes.
I feel awful saying this, but I need a recommendation. And I went down to Queens College, and just talking to the secretary, who's a very nice woman, she said, "You're a Spanish teacher. You're going to be a Spanish teacher, right?" I says, "Yeah." She says, "You know, my son is trying to get out of a contract in Brentwood." She says, "Would you like to work there?" I said, "I'd like to, but I can't afford a car." I said, "I don't have a car." She said, "Well, it's all right. You can take the train." Not realizing that taking the train would get here by 6:30, and I have to get to the high school by 7:25, whatever. And I said, "All right." So I went out. Um, I sent a note to Brentwood, and I believe I was contacted by a secretary, Chiavini.
Mm-hmm.
Secretary contacted by Chiavini, who worked for the principal. And 2 days later, I had an appointment to meet the principal. And at the time, Bob Hickey interviewed me. And the principal, I feel terrible. I forgot his name. I see him all the time also.
It was Fred Weaver?
Fred Weaver.
Yes.
All right, a man who was a very, very interesting man in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Some people said strange, and other people said he used to help people in his own way. So how strange could you be? But Mr. Weaver said, "All right." He said, "We have another candidate for the job also from Columbia University." He said, "Bob is interviewing because Mr. Stever, who was the language coordinator, wasn't here." And I went in and I started speaking, and he said, Bob Hickey said, "Don't even talk anymore. You have the job." And Mr. Weaver, knowing that I had no car, drove me to administration, where naturally I didn't know where it was. He waited for me. He helped me fill out the papers. He gave me every idea possible so that I wouldn't be fooled. He told me what I should, put down, like take X amount of percentage and whatever you had to do. Very nice man. Okay. And from when I first met Bob Hickey, we became fast friends. We just hit it off. And with Mr. Weaver, I have the utmost respect for him. Still, I have seen Mr. Weaver at Farmingdale teaching math when I was teaching Spanish there. I saw Mr. Weaver as the head of the student teachers in Dowling while I was teaching there. Mr. Weaver made an extreme effort to help me to get a job, extra jobs, because he knew I was getting married. And he said newlyweds needed money. He got me a job in Enterman's as teaching Spanish to English managers and vice versa. And Bob Hickey, as I said, we hit it off immediately. The next year next month when I started, we just hit it off.
Mm.
We became very friendly. Him and his wife met my family. We met his family. I knew all his kids. I watched them grow up. And it was a very pleasant situation.
Had you heard anything about Brentwood before you came here, Joe?
No.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, after I signed in Brentwood, they notified me in the city that I had the same job where I wanted to have it in the first place. This place, Bryan High School.
Wow.
Which was like 10 minutes by bus.
Wow.
Okay, but I felt that I gave my word, and I felt I had to be honest in my word. If you're willing to keep me for that, but I was saying to myself, well, I probably will give it up at the end of a year. And the year extended to 2, 3, and
Yes.
before you know it.
You mentioned before that in 33 years you've seen a lot of changes in the district, but do you remember some of your first impressions? The climate here, some of the colleagues you work with, good memories?
When I came here, it seemed that we were in the process of losing a lot of teachers. Yeah. It seemed that jobs were plentiful and people were not really stable, not staying in Brentwood, but going different places every year. But those that I met were really fun. We used to go have a couple of beers at Thompson Station, which
the local watering hole.
The local watering hole. I got to meet different people who were involved in the union and what have you. I got to meet really interesting people in various departments as you go down to Thompson's. You were made to feel, welcome and warm. And
listen, in addition to your teaching assignments, were you also involved in other activities or programs over the years?
Well, yes and no. I was asked to be to help out Mr. Campo, who was the wrestling coach. However, our personalities really weren't going to groove because I used to wrestle in college. He was a nice man, a good coach, certainly a great coach. But I knew I had a feeling that he didn't like me, and I said, well, I didn't want to bother. But I did a Spanish club, I did an Italian club. We in my Spanish and Italian club, we used to go to Ross nursing home and play cards to keep the people entertained once every 2 weeks. And at the time, the district wouldn't come up with a bus. And Frank Lashicott, who was one of the early administrators, would pay for the bus out of his own salary, out of his own pocket. I mean, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And I'm sure it was expensive, but he wasn't, he was a very nice man, a very, fun person. He understood men, and he thought that was the right thing to do, that I was doing the right thing by having the kids treat older people and deal with older people.
Now, what happened to all those efforts? What, that one in particular, and the
Well, I was the I can't think of the right word, but I was with the Spanish club. I was the advisor, and all of a sudden they started paying me, because at that time the duties were unpaid, and then they started switching me around because they wanted Italian in. So I wrote the program, and I started teaching only Italian one year. At the time, so I started an Italian club. And we were doing the same thing, going to the Ross nursing home. I really wasn't too creative, but I thought that was a good idea to do.
Sure.
And we had scholarships. We managed to make some money so we could have scholarships. In those days, before Matilda Como put her 2 cents in, we used to sell candy in school. And with that money, we used to give scholarships.
Yes.
Okay. And then I had good and bad situation come up. We had a new principal, and the new principal, in my opinion, and I didn't really get along. We had a similar philosophy in the lot, and we had a different philosophy in the lot. We both were family people. When he discussed his family or my family, he was the most pleasant man that you could ever meet. However, because I was a union rep, and I guess I was somewhat pushy about it, we really didn't get along. Okay, so to be spiteful, I gave him all my clubs. So I figured, well, it would make him look good, never thinking, which I should have, but never thinking that who does it really hurt but the kids. But at the time, because I had such a bad temper, I decided that, well, the hell with him. Let him get stuck. Let him get another advisor. Let them see if because we used to do interscholastic sports. For example, the Spanish club would play the French club in football or soccer. The Italian club would play the French and Spanish. We would go round robin sort of deal. So we would try to get all the kids who were in the clubs together and get them to realize, hey, you're taking foreign language. This is the idea. You can play sports or whatever. We had international nights, a few international nights that we had. And as I said, I gave it all up because of, as I look back at it now, for the wrong reasons. It was...
Did you have a favorite year of all of your years, of all of your classes? Is there one year that you can look back and say, this was really special? Or is that too difficult to do?
I would say not one year, but a number of years. Okay, especially from, I would say from about 1967 to about 1984, and then from about 1989 to about 93. They were really good years. I had some good kids. Not that I didn't have, kids who were paying the neck.
I understand.
But I had a majority of kids who were thoughtful, who were very nice, who were well-mannered, who were interested in learning.
Some teachers would have said that because you had language classes, all your students were top of the line.
Well,
They
you
were-
know, that's what we're all led to believe.
yeah.
But as the state started changing their mandates and what have you, I had special children in my classroom
Mhm.
who really weren't academic. They
Mhm.
weren't bad, but they weren't academic.
Yes.
And I would close my eyes to certain things
Sure.
and have them pass because I knew they gave me 100%, and you can't ask for more.
Did your training that you got in College of Education prepare you for Brentwood and the
Oh,
experiences?
not at all,
in the
not at
classroom?
all.
No.
It was really
Mhm.
the training that we had in college was unrealistic, to say the very least, because you never really were presented with the rights, the actual situation. And I would say I started to learn how to teach when I came to Brentwood, and under the tutelage of Mr. Bernard Stever, who I still speak to and write
Do
to
you?
today. Um, I always said he was my mentor because I think we would fight, we'd argue every day. He would say, "I don't want you to use a Castilian pronunciation that sounds like you have a lisp." And I wouldn't when he would come to visit me, and he would say to me, "I know you're doing it during class. I know you're doing it." And he was right, there's no question. But he says something that makes sense today. Take the kids from where they are and go forward. You can't say, well, they had Spanish 1, therefore you start in Spanish 2. He used to always say, take them from where they are, doesn't matter where, and go as far as you can with them. And I think he was had tremendous amount of foresight.
Go ahead. Finish what you were saying.
Tremendous amount of foresight in that sense. He more or less what his philosophy embraced is the philosophy that we're embracing now.
Yeah.
And
Now, you had a job description in any position you've held, but regardless of what the job description from the district point of view was, what was your own mission in that classroom or in that? What did you see as
Okay.
your role?
I had a couple of different roles. My first role was to try to make these kids be appreciative of their family, be appreciative of the things they've had, treat people equally. Don't hold petty prejudices. I mean, you could be prejudiced. That's your prerogative, but not to be prejudiced against everybody when maybe it's one person that you really don't like. I try to foster friendship among the students and a little bit of freedom, not a lot, because we were taught in those days, you come in, you don't smile until December. And consequently, I more or less followed that kind of situation. And there was one situation where Mr. Steber had told me, he said, I heard 2 kids that you have in your class, and they said, oh, he's a bastard, but he's a good teacher. She says, that saved you. That's what he told me. But Mrs. Steber and I would go around and around, and as I said, that was the first thing as far as my thoughts. My second thing was teaching them Spanish, but I knew in 42 minutes at 5 days a week when they had 5 other majors, unless they really were interested, they weren't really going to become Spanish teachers. I believe out of my 33 years, there's 1 girl who became 2 girls who became Spanish teachers, and whom I still see. Okay, and but the teaching them Spanish was a secondary thing. I really wanted to make them good citizens and good human beings. That to me was the most important, because you went out and worked, and you had to know how to deal with people, treat people, understand feelings, and what have you.
Which brings me to my next question. What makes you angry?
Well, I tell you the truth, dishonesty in all its forms. And it's not the matter of telling me a little white lie or something, but dishonesty in so many different forms, and a lack of trying to improve yourself. I could feel myself lose my temper till this very moment.
Yeah.
That still exists.
I'm gonna realizing that we're gonna run out of time unless I get to some of the other questions, and I'm enjoying this more than you can possibly know. You were active in the BTA from early on. I
Yeah.
guess you waited until you were tenured
I
before you got
waited until I
involved.
was tenured, and I was mistreated by Dave Martz.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point on, not that Dave was, was mean to me, but he mistreated me in certain ways
Mm-hmm.
because I had the president of the board's daughter in my class, and I failed her.
Mm-hmm.
And I started having pressure, and I really wasn't happy about that. And I decided I was going to get involved in the union. And how I first started was Tom. Let me think.
Brush. No?
Tom Brush. He was a shop teacher here. His name was
Tagle?
Tom Tagle. Tom Tagle was the grievance person in the Sondling building, and he was trying to get rid of it because he was going to go into administration. And he said to me, "Would you want to take it?" I said, "I don't know anything about it." He said, "Go ahead, try." I said, "You'll enjoy it. It's a nice thing." And sure enough, I got to be a grievance person. I met people like Tom Brush. I met people like Dot and Jack Zuckerman, the old-fashioned socialists who really were looking out for the betterment of the worker. And I've always, every time I see Jack and Dot, which I still do, I always say to them, you're the old-fashioned Russian socialists that have people in the middle of everything. That those are the most important things, working conditions, what have you. And I started to get involved. Before I knew it, I was chief delegate of the building. And I was financial secretary of the union, where I ran at the time against Jack Zuckerman's handpicked person. There was an opposing slate. If I don't remember who was opposing the slate, but it was an opposing slate for financial secretary and myself. Knowing my mathematical abilities, you have to think,
Yes.
what nerve.
Yes.
But thank God they had a secretary who was marvelous, and she did all the math, okay? But I really started getting involved, and I decided I wanted to run for the executive council because I felt I was going to be working in Brentwood, and I saw the conditions, and I felt I really want to see something done, not only for myself, but for future teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it now, my daughter is here, and the same thing. And, you get to meet, like I said, Tom Brush. We met the Guy Di Pietro.
What was one of the most important important political struggles that you were involved in?
Well, that was referred to when Mr. Pulio became this high school principal, I believe in '85.
Okay. Yeah.
And I may be wrong, but I've always felt that after he left his position, that he retired, I think the school went down from that point as far as the loyalty of the teachers. Because the teachers were always loyal. They would fight with Stan, but they were loyal to him. I mean, Stan did some strange things. Sometimes takes book off the library, was dealt with witchcraft or something, and you would fight like crazy with him. But he was an honorable man. He was very fair, and he knew how to separate the individual from the union person. Like I would go into Stan's office, start banging like a crazy man, banging his desk, and I'd come back the 8th period, and I'd say, "Stan, I'm really sorry. I'm embarrassed for the way I behaved with you." And he'd laugh and say, "No, you gave me a good chuckle." While in this other situation, this person, Mr. Pulio, was I believe he was sincere as far as what he wanted to do. I think the manner in which he approached it was incorrect. And what happened from the very, very beginning, I believe he was an elementary school principal. And elementary school principals always had like a fiefdom, where no one would dare question his or her his authority. They would never say, well, maybe this is the wrong way, we could approach it another way. I had known a couple of people whom he made cry, some women who were elementary school teachers. And I felt from that point on, you can't do these things. I don't know if he meant he wanted them to cry or it just happened because anything could be.
Mm-hmm.
But at the wind-up, Mr. Pulio and myself locked horns off of a variety of issues, union versus administration.
Mm-hmm.
I think he felt administration had any prerogative that it wanted. Meantime, the contract specifically said what they could and could not do in certain cases.
Is that one? Are we talking about a period of time when there was a newsletter that began to appear?
Yeah, we were in a terrible discussion with him, and we discussed, and he was adamant, I was adamant, and so we decided another way of attacking. These were my advisors because I really wasn't smart enough to think about it on my own. And I had different teachers whose names will never be repeated. Different teachers would write an article that would be sarcastic, that would be thinly veiled, would be an attack against him personally. And I'd sign my name. So let's say Mr. X wrote the first article, Miss Y wrote the second article, so there was never the same style. And some other teachers contributed some poetry and some other stuff to a little newsletter. We were informing the faculty also what was going on. And sometimes, I would say sometimes I took it to extreme.
Eventually, the superintendent got involved.
Eventually, the superintendent sent me a note saying, Joe, stop calling Carmine, stop calling Carmine, or stop calling Chuck Carmelo. And I thought it would be, thought it was funny. And obviously he didn't. And I didn't know which way, because I really couldn't budge him. And there were points that were terrible. And at the time, Les Black was president. And if I remember correctly, I believe Mike Palazzolo was vice president. And they relayed messages to me from the superintendent. But I think it was that period of time where after his being principal, he left. The teachers were never the same.
Yeah.
The politics got better on one hand, but it was never the same. There wasn't that same loyalty. You never heard until that point where people started saying, "Oh, I hate coming here," what have you. I think this was not the situation before that.
Were you ever afraid to come to work?
No, not at all.
One of an accomplishment that you were the most proud of all of the years that you've worked here.
Well, I think the fact that I was a financial secretary of the union, the fact that I was able to help people who were in trouble,
Okay.
I think is an important situation.
Now, because we're running out of time ourselves here, the actual date of your retirement
is June 1999.
Okay, so
I guess June 30th, 1999.
So you have just begun, because here we are in July.
I've begun a new life.
A new life. You've got a third of your life ahead of you, Joe, at this point. Kind of running through these. Did you make this decision quickly, or was it?
No, I made it a year and a half ago
Okay.
because I knew at 55 I would get the 25%.
Any ambivalence about the decision when you made it?
Not at all.
No. Okay.
Not yet, anyway.
Yes. Okay. What are your plans from this point on? What do you like to do?
A couple of plans. I wanted to do something in school, which I'm doing. In September, I'm planning to go on a 5 or 6 country trip, including Russia, if this problem in Kosovo doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
I'm planning to teach again at Suffolk Community in February.
Oh, you're going to be busy in your, quote, retirement. Unquote.
I plan to get involved with the retired teachers. I think it's important. I plan to take a course in Stony Brook on Chinese language because it always interested me. I plan to do, and
I'm out of breath already here.
Starting, I'm just about ready to start now. I'm going to be doing some volunteer work at St. John's Hospital. So I have a lot.
Okay.
And I'm thinking of teaching the GEDs in Spanish.
Wow. You've got quite a plate full there, Joe.
Yeah.
Remember when we used to long for making $10,000 a year?
Absolutely.
That was a dream. What did you start at when you first came to Brentwood?
I started at $5,900.
Mm-hmm.
The city teachers were starting at $54, and here was $59, and gas was 23 cents a gallon.
What are you going to miss the most?
The interaction with some colleagues and interaction with some students, some of the student body. there's some colleagues I will always see because I have their phone numbers, they have mine, and we've been friends for a long time. But even the ones whom I'm not personally friendly with that would go to my house or I'd go to theirs, there's a certain nice feeling when you get together with them. Although lately, as the teachers are getting younger, you have nothing in common. So I look forward to the retired teachers organization because you have something in common. You know the same people. You live through the same era, and it's fun to reminisce.
You're a practical guy. You told me before you don't like to fantasize too much, but I want to ask you to look into that crystal ball of yours. 5 years from now, what do you see yourself doing?
Well, I see myself doing what I had mentioned before, as far as doing all those things.
All of those things.
All of those things.
You're not planning to take it easy, then?
Oh, no, not at all, because I don't believe retirement was for our parents. You sat home,
Okay.
you didn't do much. This is a new age. And I still think I have energy and thoughts to transfer to other people. You know, like energy and thoughts like about behavior, about the way of being, the way the society is. And my thought has always been to improve our situation. I hope I still can contribute to that.
I know you can, and I know you
Hope
will,
so.
Joe. And I hear one thing underlying everything you've said. You plan to have a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because the things that I plan to do are all fun. Nothing serious.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
so
John.
much.
Thank you.